Assalamualaikum and good morning everyone. So today we are going to continue our lecture in your fourth week. Alright, so let me share my slide first. Okay, for today we are going to study about the evolutionary approach in animal behavior. Okay, hopefully all of you can see my slide. Okay, before we go further into our topic, so let we revise back, okay, about the terms and meaning, okay, of each term that I'm going to use for this topic. So the first one is evolution. So the evolution is the process by which modern organisms have descended from ancient organism, okay, over the time. And the term of common ancestor is actually the ancestor shared by two or more descendant species. Okay, so we call it as a common, okay, common ancestor. And the natural selection. So the natural selection is actually the evolutionary mechanism in which individuals that are better suited to their environment survive and reproduce most successfully. So that is the natural selections. And variation. Variation is the difference between traits in individuals of the same species. So that is we call as the variations. And adaptation. So adaptation is here is a trait that improve, okay, an organism's ability to survive and to reproduce in an environment. So that is the adaptation. All right. And the fitness is the ability of an organism to survive and reproduce the ability. Okay, so this is the term that I'm going to use for this topic. So evolution. So what is the evolution? So again, evolution is any change in allele, okay, or gene frequencies in a population over the time, okay. And how about allele? So allele here is the variant of gene or trait, okay. So actually, the evolution is any change in the variation of the gene or trait frequencies in a population over the time. And if frequency of particularly variants of trait changes over the time, so this is what we call as the evolutions. And evolution is a fact, okay? And the species change over the time, okay? All the species will change over the time. It is a fact. And biological evolution, we can simply put it is descent with modifications. And the evolution will help us to understand the history of life of an organisms. And the biological evolution is not simply a matter of change over the times. Okay, a lot of things change over the time, like trees lose their leaf, mountain ranges rise and erode. But there is not the examples of biological evolution, because all of these examples, okay, they don't evolve the descent through genetic inheritance. Okay, so we go to the examples of variation in traits. Okay, just now there is no variation in traits, but here is the example. So we have the eye color. Okay, we also have the blood type, the camouflage in animals, and also we have the variations in behavior, like the timing of shell removals for the black-headed gulls. We have 45, sometimes it will change to 50 to 60 minutes after hatchings. So this is all the examples of variation in traits. Okay. In the history of life that we are looking at the patterns, okay. So we're looking at the pattern of the central ideas of evolutions, that the life has a history, which is it changed over the times, okay, and that different species share a common ancestors. So this is what we call as family tree. So this is the family tree where all of the different species here, okay, all of the different species here, they are actually share a common ancestor, okay. So actually, the primates and the rodents are come from the same ancestor. Okay, the amphibians and all of the groups came from the same ancestor. Okay, so all of the different species here, they actually share a common ancestor. So just now with the evolutions, okay, in organisms. So now we are talking about the evolution in behavior. Okay, we will study the details about the evolution in behavior. So we have six evolution in behavior. We have the adaptiveness. We also have the ESS. Okay, the evolutionary stable strategies. We also have the cultural transmissions. We also have the genes and behavior, infanticide. Okay, where the infanticide is actually a sexual selected male strategy. And the sixth one, we have the evolution and human culture. But for today topic, we are going to focus on these three evolution in behavior. And on the next day, on the next Thursday, we are going to continue back with these three evolution in behavior. So we go to one by one. The first one is the adaptiveness of behavior. So the evolutionary adaptations are the changes that occur over the long periods of time. Okay, so the adaptation is actually the result of natural selections. Okay, so the evolutions also is the descent of with modifications population of organisms that change over. Okay, they change over the course of generations. Okay, so the adaptation is actually the result of one of the means of the modifications. So that adaptations in here change made by organism in response to the environments. Okay, so that the environments we call as the external stimuli. So if an organism can survive without needing to change, or can survive without needing to adapt, okay, anything about itself, then it's okay. Okay, then it will be. For example, the armadillos, many of insects, also fish. However, some organism must adapt. Okay, some organism must need to change. Okay, in response to the environmental. Okay, some of organisms need to adapt. Okay, or risk, or they will be risked by chance of extinctions. Okay, so some of organisms must adapt or must change in the response of environment. Okay, otherwise they will risk the chance of extinction. So this is the examples of the adaptiveness of behavior. Okay, so the male mole cricket. So the male mole cricket, they will dig the burrows underground in which they sit, okay, and sing in order to attract the females flying overhead. Okay, in order to attract female which flying over the surface. So for example, in here, so this figure is actually the side view of male of two species, okay, of the Grylotolpa, which they are sitting in their burrows, okay, the head downwards, okay, the head downwards in the singing positions. So the shape of their burrows is approximately to an exponential on here, okay. So the first species, which is the G. okay, on the right, so they have a smooth tunnel and they will produce a much louder song, okay, with the shape of this tunnel. However, for this the G. Glyrotalpa species, okay, um, they have a very not really smooth tunnel, okay, but in both of these cases, okay, in both of cases of the shapes, okay, so this is the adapted to their song frequency, okay, as you can see here. So this is the oscillograms, okay, uh, of each species, so as to emit with the maximum efficiency of the sounds. Okay, so these species have a greater sounds compared this to this species. So the efficient sounds production favored by natural selections. So the adaptation actually is the result of the natural selection. So the sound of the song of each species, we have two species just now, is determined by the structure and the size of the forewing. So this is actually the direct correlation between the behavior. Okay, so the behavior in here is the singing and also the morphology. Okay, so the direct correlation between these two factors. But the more cricket's adaptiveness go much further than this, correlation, which is the build of a horn. So this first species, the GV9, so the wall are smooth and barb. Okay, they have a barb that acts as a resistive load for the vibrating wings. Okay, for example, and the other one is the G. Grylotalpa. So they have a much larger and also very effective at applying sound. They have a much larger guru, and these were effective at amplifying the sounds. So the wing structure, the swinging, and the burrow digging behavior all are precisely co-adapted in order to produce an efficient sound which aim want to attract the females, okay, that fly above the surface. Okay, so this is what we call the adaptiveness of behavior. There are examples. Okay, for example, in here the black-headed gull. So the black-headed gull will remove the empty shells. Okay, so in order to make the eggs less vulnerable to cross or the herring gulls. While for the kittiwake, okay, the kittiwake gulls, these groups of gulls they do not have to throw away the eggshells. Okay, because of the nests are built on the cliff of ledge. Okay, so this is all the adaptiveness of behavior. Some of the organism needs to adapt to their environments. Okay, like this one, the kittiwake do not don't have to throw away the eggshells, while the black-headed gull they need to throw away the eggshells. Okay, in order to make the eggs survive. Okay, from the predator. So how effective the natural selections can be in the shaping of behavior. Okay, it is often result not in the best, okay, but in the best compromise, because one single aspect of behavior can rarely involve in isolation. So this is the adaptiveness in within an ecosystem, the adaptiveness of behavior within an ecosystem. Okay, for example, in here, so organisms that live together within an ecosystem are all competing for the same resources. Okay, however, their specific adaptations, okay, allow them to be specialized in their niche. They have the specialized in their own niche, and therefore this will reduce the competition for resources in the same way, even though all of them are live in the same ecosystem. For example, in here, the giraffe. Okay, the giraffe eat from the trees instead of the shorter ones where all the other animals eat. Okay, so giraffe eat from the tall trees, while zebra eat from the top part of the grass. Okay, they eat the grass, the top part of the grass. The wildebeest they eat the leaf, while the gazelles they eat the rest of what left. So all of this is the organism that live together in an ecosystem, but because of they have their specific adaptations, okay, so it will reduce the competition for the same resources, okay, the food. So this is the example of adaptiveness of behavior within an ecosystem. So how about the adaptation and mutation? What is actually the mutations? So mutation is when a new or a different genetic traits first appear in an organism, and it is often looked as a mutations. Okay, when there is a new or a different genetic traits that is first appear in an organism. Okay, appear. So not all the mutations are bad when they are caused by gene shuffling. Okay, it just means something different than what is normally expected. Okay, so the gene sampling here we also call as a genetic recombination, and it is the creation of new combinations of traits in offsprings that are different from those in the parents. Okay, so this gene sampling was passed on the offspring due to large amount of DNA combination possibilities. So this is what we call as a gene sampling. So if the mutation allows for the organism to survive and reproduce, so it may become a new trait. Okay, if the mutations, okay, the difference or the changing or the new traits in the DNA, okay, that allow the organism to survive, so it may become a new trait, and in fact it may create a new species with those traits being important or necessary for their survival. Okay, so that is the mutation. And for the adaptation is actually the competition for resources that the ever-changing environment calls for organism to change if they are going to survive and continue in the future. Okay, so this is the different adaptation and mutations. So if the mutation is caused by the some sort of outside interference, okay, for example the air pollution, then severe mutation can occur, and they may in fact be harmful to the organism if the mutations are given harmful to the organisms. Okay, so this type of mutation are different than a gene shuffling just now I'm talking about. Okay, so the gene shuffling is actually the genetic recombinations, that is creations of new combinations, okay, of traits in the offspring that are different from those in the parents that give the, that give them the benefits in order for them to survive. Okay, so if but this mutation is a difference, okay, than the shuffling mutation, because caused by the different DNA possibilities of the parents without such outside interference. Okay, so the mutations that caused by the outside interference may be harmful to the organism. For example, in here, so this is a piglet which was born with, they have a three eyes and also two mouth. Uh, so this piglet was among the 8 newborn piglet and the China province. So a local veterinarian said that the abnormality of this piglet may be caused by the genetic mutations or feed pollutions. Okay, so during that time, China suffers heavily from the environmental pollution. So this is the mutation that cause that can be harm to the organisms. Okay, that have the interference from the environment. Okay, we go to the second type of evolution in behavior. We call it as the ESS, or evolutionary stable strategies. So the ESS is actually a behavior that when the organism adopted by a population of players cannot be invaded by an alternative strategy. So what does it mean? So it is a Nash equilibrium that is evolutionary stable. So once it is fixed in a population, okay, one the strategy is fixed in a population, so natural selection alone is sufficient to prevent alternative, okay, strategies from invading the successfully. So the theory is not intended to deal with the possibility of gross external changes to the environment that bring new selective forces to bear. So the ESS give the benefits. Okay, the benefit of the ESS is actually depends on what the other animals around are doing. So it means that the benefit of this, the ESS is actually to the organism actually depends on what the other organisms, the other animals around are doing. So it applied to aggressions, okay, and the best strategy is, for example, attack or retreat. Either attack or retreat the strategies, okay. It's very dependent on what strategy that opponent takes up. So if A, okay, the strategy either they want to attack or retreat, it actually depends on what is actually B are doing, okay. Okay, for example, in here, it is the winning strategy, the ESS. If you still remember, we're talking about the stacklefish bird, the stacklefish, okay, which have the red belly. So the redness, the more redness of the father, it will have less offspring that infected by the tapeworm. Okay, it actually depends on um, the other animals. Okay, the strategy is actually depends on the other animals that around the organisms. Okay, so the ESS actually introduced by Maynard Smith and Price, okay, in 1973. So this strategy actually becomes stable throughout the populations, and the mutation are become ineffective. Okay. So the second examples of ESS is the Hawkdorf game. We call as the Hawkdorf game. So the name of the Hawkdorf is actually refers to a situation in which there is a competition for a shared resources, and the contestants can choose either conciliations or conflict. Okay. So this terminology is most commonly used in biology and evolutionary game theory. For example, in here we said the hawk dove game. So the hawk is actually, so this is the hawk is actually very aggressive, always fights each other and always fight for the same resource. While dove, okay, this is a dove. So this dove is the animals that never fights for a resource. Okay, it displays in many any conflict, and if this attack, okay, and this dove will immediately withdraw before it get injured. So this is the character of hawk and dove. So this strategy, so in any conflict situation, dove will always lose the resources to a hawk, okay, because doves will always not fighting to get the resources, but it is never get hurt. So the dove will never get hurt. Okay, so which the never sustain decrease in fitness when confronting a hawk, and therefore the interactions are neutral with respect to the dove fitness. Okay, and can you imagine if a hawk only a population, okay, one population only a hawk, one population only have the hawk characters. Okay, how can it be? Okay, and can you imagine if a dove only a population, one population only a dove characters. Okay, so the hawk population, if only one population have a hawk character, so they will always fighting and unrest. They will always compete for the same resources. They will always fighting each other. And if the dove in only the population, it is too peaceful. Okay, because the dove always display, never fight. Okay, and always withdraw if there is a fighting. So if the dove only population, there is no healthy competition. Okay, so none of this is ideal situations. Okay, none of these situations are ESS. Okay, or in Nash equilibrium. So this is the game theory of hard dove game. Okay, is a study of strategic decision making. Okay, and what is actually if the hawk and dove confront each other, so what is actually the value and the cost, okay, that might take in, okay, in any situations. Okay, so let me see the video for you to more understand about the game theory of hawk dove. So this is the explanation on hawk dove game. All right, let me see. Wait a minute, hold on. Okay.
Maynard Smith pioneered the idea of using game theory to model that scenario. And game theory is basically the study of strategic decision making. And it's widely used not just in biology, but also in economics, political science, and in psychology. The idea behind game theory is that we can simulate the outcomes of particular strategies by playing them as if they were evolutionary games. The contestants, or players in this game, are individual animals who can choose a particular strategy. So a strategy might be fight, or it might be display, or it might be run away. The consequences of a given strategy are measured as the payoffs of that strategy. In the case of animals, that payoff would normally correspond to a gain of fitness. Maynard Smith developed a very simple game to understand animal conflict over resources, which is called the hawk-dove game. And in this game, animals that choose to fight are called hawks, while those that choose to display instead are called doves. So, for example, if a stag had the strategy of hawk, it's willing to fight in order to have a resource. By contrast, a stag playing dove will posture a bit by roaring, but then back down if another one starts to fight. So, what happens when hawks and doves play each other in this game? Well, when a hawk meets a dove, the hawk always wins because the dove retreats. When a hawk meets a hawk, then there's a fight between them until one of them is injured. Assuming that they are usually evenly matched, then each of them has an equal chance of winning the fight, and so it wins about half of the time. When a dove meets another dove, they engage in a prolonged posturing exercise until one of them decides to give up and leave. Again, we assume that each of them has about a 50% chance of outlasting the other. Each dove wins about half of the time. Now, let's suppose that the animals are contesting a resource with a certain value, which we will call V. The winners get V, the losers get nothing. But let's also suppose that serious injuries that are inflicted by fighting hawks inflict a cost, which we will call C. We can now try and get a sense of some of the payoffs that come out of this game for the contestants. When a hawk meets a dove, it will get V, while a dove meeting a hawk gets 0. When two doves meet, the value of the resource is split between them, so they get the equivalent of a half V. And when two hawks meet, they also get half of the resource on average, but they also incur about half of the risk of the injury, and that reduces the value of the resource, so they get half V minus C. Let's try to see what happens when we use some numerical values to work out the payoffs. First thing we have to consider is whether V, the value of the resource, is smaller or larger than C, the cost of injury. Now, in most contests in nature, it seems reasonable to assume that the value of the resource will be smaller than the cost. That is because it'll rarely be worth risking serious injury from a fight simply to win an item of food or access to shelter. So we'll assign an arbitrary value of 50 to V and an arbitrary value of 100 to C. In practice, it doesn't actually matter what values you assign to V and C, the outcome is always the same if V is smaller than C. So what do we have? When a hawk meets a dove, the hawk gets 50, the value of the resource, while when a dove meets a hawk, the dove gets nothing. When two doves meet, the average payoff is 25, which is exactly half the value of the resource. The doves pay no cost. When two hawks meet, they gain on average half of the value of the resource, which is 50, but each also has to pay half the cost of the injury, 100, and the hawks end up with, on average, minus 25. Now we can see from the matrix that the maximum payoff occurs when a hawk meets a dove, plus 50 here. And we can conclude from that in a population consisting mainly of doves, the hawk strategy would have the highest payoff, because a hawk gains 50 every time it meets a dove, whereas doves can't do any better than 25. So on a population consisting mainly of doves with rare hawks, the hawk strategy will win. On the other hand, in a population consisting mainly of hawks, dove will actually be a better strategy to play. And this is because most of the hawks will be busy fighting other hawks and getting -25, whereas a dove losing to a hawk does no worse than 0, because it doesn't pay the cost of injury. What that means is that when hawks are common, the dove strategy is the strategy that wins.
Okay. So we continue back to our
So today I'm
slide.
at the University of Cambridge to speak with Dr. Kat Keats about her recent biology lesson.
So this is actually the explanations video of hawk dove game. All right. So and again, when the dove are common, okay, so the hawk strategies will win. Okay, sorry. Okay, if the dove are common, so the hawk strategies will win. Okay, because the hawk get more than the dove, and when the hawk are common, okay, so the dove strategy will win. They won't get any benefits. Okay, but have they won't have to lose any cost. Okay, so many animals react aggressively or not depending on their opponent size or correlated features. The other example in here, the male toad that claps females before the egg are laid and fertilized are often aggressively displaced by a larger males, okay, but not by the smaller ones. So a male is unlikely to try to displace a mounted male that is larger than himself. Okay. So that is what we call as the ESS. So we move to the third type of the evolution in behavior, which is the cultural transmissions of behavior. So the cultural transmission in behavior is a behavioral traits may be horizontally propagated without any genetic changes. Okay, so this is the behavior trait. Okay, that they actually without any genetic changes and involved. Okay, so we call as the cultural evolutions. For example, the human languages, the human culture, or the other example in the primates like macaque washing a potatoes. Okay, later on we'll see the video, or the chimpanzees feast for termite. So all of this is actually the cultural evolution, the evolution that not involve the genetic changes. Okay. Okay, so I already upload in your spectrums actually the video of culture of tool used in primate, because the video is 10 minute plus, so you can watch it later. And for now, we are going to see the video of Japanese macaque washing potatoes. So this is the cultural, the evolution in culture. So this is the Japanese macaque that washing potatoes. Okay. So that is actually the video of Japanese macaque washing potato. So actually, this habit, the habit of washing potato is actually first observed by an individual of macaque, and then which it eventually taught other macaques on how to do it, how to wash the potatoes. So it has become a occurring trait. So this is the cultural evolutions. Okay. So the other examples is the maintenance of song dialect in many birds. For example, in here we have white crown sparrow. So in here they have a several situation here. So the chick's ability to learn song it depends on both biological and social cues. Okay, the ability of the chicks to learn a song is depends on biological and social cues. For example, in here, so A. So if the chicks are exposed to the songs of many species while they are growing up, so the chick invariably picks out and learns the correct songs. Okay, but if the chicks is isolated during the song learning phase, so the chick will produce only a rough outline of a normal sound. And if the chicks are different at an early age, the chicks song is entirely abnormal. Okay, and if the chicks that is socially okay but not acoustically isolated from its own species. Okay, if a chick that is socially isolated, okay, but not acoustically from its own species, but in contact with the other adult of another species, so the chick will learn it tutor's song. So actually, the ability of chicks to learn a song is actually depends on both either the biological parents, okay, or the social cues. Okay, so yeah, it's end of our topic for today. So for the next Thursday, we will continue again about this topic on the evolution in behavior. Okay, guys, Assalamualaikum. See you next time.